A starving bear knocks on a man's cabin door. What the cameras captured is unbelievable. There are moments in life that stand so starkly apart from our routine that they could be scenes from a dream. Imagine a man tucked away in a secluded cabin on the outskirts of Glacier National Park, woken by a frantic knocking at his door. Now picture what he finds on his porch, a hungry, emaciated bear, not roaring or threatening, but reaching out for help in the most unexpected, heartbreaking way. The cameras set around the property capture every second, every trembling breath of both man and beast. This is a story of survival, vulnerability, and an indescribable bond that defies all expectations. Thomas Hayes had never considered himself much of a social butterfly. In fact, the very notion of living in a bustling city made his chest tighten with an unnamed anxiety. So, when he inherited his grandfather's old cabin just beyond the eastern boundary of Glacier National Park in Montana, he took it as a sign, maybe even a calling. He packed up his meager belongings, said his goodbyes to a comfortable but unfulfilling life, and settled into the rustic, one-room hideaway. The cabin itself was perched at the end of a long dirt road, shaded by towering pines that whispered ghostly secrets when the wind picked up. Inside, the walls still bore the scent of cedar, a testament to the original logs that had been cut from nearby forests generations ago. A pair of old rocking chairs sat on the front porch, worn smooth by the backs of calloused men who used to rest there after a hard day's work. For Thomas, this cabin represented more than a place to rest. It was a sanctuary to heal. He was trying to piece his life back together after losing his father to a sudden heart attack the previous year. Coming here, away from the noise, gave him space to breathe. Most of his daily interactions boiled down to occasional forays into town for supplies, canned goods, fresh produce, maybe the local newspaper to keep up with world events. The rest of the time, he spent tinkering with the cabin's solar generator or writing in his worn leather journal. He had installed a set of security cameras around the property, more out of a sense of caution than genuine fear. After all, he was in bear country. Better to have an early warning system than none at all. Still, in his first few months, Thomas found his quiet sojourn nearly idyllic. He'd wake to sunlight streaming through the windows, brew coffee on the ancient stovetop, and step onto the porch to watch deer and elk graze in the distance. The forest was alive with sound and color, chirping of birds at dawn, the rustling of leaves, and, at times, the heavy hush of impending rain. In the evenings, he would settle into the rocking chair with a battered copy of his father's favorite book, Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck, determined to find echoes of paternal wisdom in its pages. He never imagined that, amidst this peaceful routine, something so extraordinary would soon happen. The cameras would capture in unflinching detail. It began like any other evening. Thomas had just finished supper, roasted vegetables, and a piece of fish caught earlier in the day when the sound of soft thunder rolled across the sky. He felt a gentle chill in the air, so he stoked the fire in the wood-burning stove and settled in for the night, lulled by the crackle of flames. Outside, darkness stretched over the forest like a vast, star-studded tapestry. Around midnight, Thomas stirred awake, heart thumping in his chest, unsure of what had pulled him from slumber. Then came the knock, timid but clear. At first, he thought someone must be playing a prank, or maybe one of the rangers had shown up unexpectedly. But there it was again, a soft thud, then a heavier one, like claws or paws scraping against wood. Adrenaline coursed through him. He carefully reached for the flashlight by his bedside, mind racing with possibilities. A lost hiker? An injured animal? Or maybe just a branch knocked loose by the wind? Gathering his courage, he crept toward the front door. In that charged moment, every sound felt magnified. The groan of the floorboards under his feet made him cringe. The wind whistling through the cracks in the windows sounded like a warning. Another series of knocks grew more desperate, and he realized, with a sinking feeling, they weren't knocks from a human fist. Thomas's hand trembled on the doorknob. He flicked on the porch light and eased the door open, and what he saw froze him in place. A gaunt, bedraggled black bear, standing on its hind legs, its massive paws pressed against the doorframe. For an instant, man and beast just stared at each other in the flickering light. The bear's ribs jutted out starkly, and its eyes, dark and wide, reflected a profound desperation. What did one do in this situation? Common sense dictated that close contact with a wild bear was dangerous. But every protective instinct in Thomas howled in protest at the sight of such a pitiful creature. Hesitation warred with compassion. Before Thomas could even think it through, he slammed the door shut, heart hammering. He scrambled to check the camera feed on his small monitor in the corner. The images showed the bear still hunched by the door, as though expecting someone to open it again. It didn't swipe or roar. It didn't try to break in. It just waited, panting softly, each breath visible in the cool night air. And in that moment, Thomas felt an almost unbearable empathy. Despite the jolt of fear running through him, Thomas found himself stepping back to the door. Common advice about wild bears replayed in his mind: don't feed them, keep distance, call wildlife authorities. But this wasn't a scenario he'd ever trained for. This bear looked like it was on the brink of starvation, an alarming sight in an area known for robust wildlife. He risked a peek through the window. The bear hadn't moved. There was no aggression in its posture. Instead, it seemed resigned, as though it had used its last ounce of energy to climb the porch steps and had nowhere else to go. An unexpected wave of compassion rolled over him. He knew the dangers. A fed bear can become a nuisance bear, reliant on human food, eventually leading to its relocation or euthanasia. But turning it away felt inhumane. Unsure, Thomas rushed to his pantry, scanning for something that might help without causing harm. He grabbed a few frozen fish fillets, half a loaf of bread, and some leftover chicken. Hand shaking, he slid open the window just enough to toss the food out. The bear sniffed cautiously, then devoured it in seconds. Thomas threw out a bowl of water next, stepping back swiftly. When the bear drank, it made an odd, guttural sound, a mixture of relief and desperation. The sight was heartbreaking, but practical concerns loomed in Thomas's mind. He knew this couldn't become a regular feeding station. Still, he felt compelled to do something immediate, aware that he was stepping into dangerous territory, both legally and morally. Perhaps, he reasoned, he could offer a small respite for one night and contact park rangers in the morning. Then, in an almost surreal moment, the bear raised its head, locked eyes with Thomas through the window, and let out a small whine. It wasn't a roar or a snarl. It sounded more like a plea. Thomas felt tears prick the corners of his eyes. He closed the window, leaning against the wall, breath shaky. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "I'll find help for you tomorrow." Morning arrived with a cold drizzle that blanketed the forest in grey. Thomas spent hours on the phone, trying to reach local wildlife authorities. Between poor reception and the rangers being inundated with other tasks, he received only vague promises to send someone out soon. The hours dragged, and the bear remained near the property, hovering at the tree line. Thomas could see it pacing, occasionally lying down on the damp earth, as though waiting. He watched the security footage from the night before, replaying those critical moments. The clarity of the bear's desperation was even more haunting when viewed in daylight. The bear seemed less like a wild creature and more like a lost soul. As evening approached and no ranger vehicle arrived, Thomas found himself warming leftover stew on the stove, glancing out the window every few minutes. The bear had not left. It ambled around weakly, searching for scraps or insects among the trees. Waves of guilt and pity gnawed at Thomas's gut. He decided to toss out a bit more food, but he needed to be careful. Another day of feeding might seal the bear's fate as a problem bear, and yet letting a creature starve at his doorstep felt unconscionable. He reasoned that this was a short-term solution until professional help arrived. So, when dusk settled, he placed some food a safer distance away from the cabin. The bear approached slowly, ate in silence, and then resumed its vigil near the cabin's perimeter. That night, Thomas slept fitfully, dreaming of a half-starved cub he'd once rescued from a ditch as a child. The memory merged with the present, forming a tapestry of concern and empathy he couldn't shake. Over the next few days, the weather turned harsher. Frost coated every surface in the mornings, and snow began to drift from steel-grey skies. Thomas made several more calls to the rangers, each time receiving assurances that an officer would come by soon. But with winter storms closing in and the remote location, resources were stretched thin. To complicate matters, Thomas's food supplies began to dwindle. He had stocked enough for himself, planning only occasional trips into town. Now he was sharing limited provisions with a fully grown bear. A moral crisis churned within him. He knew this situation was unsustainable. Each day, though, the bond grew. The bear, though still skittish, allowed Thomas to stand on the porch while it ate. It no longer ran at the sight of him. Instead, it approached with slow, deliberate steps, eyes full of uncertain hope. Thomas could feel the heartbeat of nature in those encounters, a raw, unspoken connection that blurred the line between man and beast. Late one afternoon, Thomas found himself talking to the bear as it drank from a metal basin of water. "You know," he said softly, leaning against the porch railing, "I'm not sure if the rangers are ever going to show, and I can't keep feeding you, big fella. But there must be a reason you came here, right? I've been through some rough stuff too." The bear made no reply, of course, but its silent stare seemed to speak volumes. Thomas felt an inexplicable calm wash over him, as if the act of caring for another being, especially one so close to death, was mending something inside him. That evening, as Thomas was reviewing the camera footage for any sign of approaching vehicles or additional wildlife, he noticed something peculiar. One of the cameras near the tree line had recorded the bear earlier that day, walking in a staggered manner, pausing intermittently to scratch at its side. Zooming in, Thomas saw a glimpse of a raw, infected wound across the bear's flank. His heart lurched. The bear wasn't just starving, it was injured. No wonder it hadn't ventured far. Perhaps it was unable to hunt or forage effectively. This new information sparked a sense of urgency. He needed to do more than feed it. The bear might need medical attention. Thomas grabbed his first aid kit and rummaged around for anything that could help: antiseptic, bandages, gauze. But the notion of actually administering first aid to a wild bear was absurd. Even in its weakened state, a single defensive swipe could be lethal. Nonetheless, the following day, while the bear ate, Thomas quietly set down a small tub of water mixed with mild disinfectant near the food bowl. If the bear lay in it or stepped in it, it might clean the wound slightly. It was a makeshift solution, far from ideal, but it was something. To Thomas's surprise, the bear did sniff curiously at the tub. It nudged it with its nose, causing some water to slosh onto its paw. But whether any of it helped was unclear. The wound remained red and angry-looking. Desperate, Thomas recorded a short video of the bear's condition on his old digital camera, an aging Canon model that had documented happier times. In the video, he zoomed in on the wound, the protruding ribs, the labored breathing. He then emailed it to the park's ranger station, labeling it urgent: "Starving and injured bear." Days passed without a clear response. Snow began to accumulate, dusting the forest floor in a thin, white blanket. The bear's visits continued, and each night Thomas's camera recorded the same heartbreaking ritual, the bear approaching, searching for sustenance, staying close by as if tethered by some silent promise. The real turning point arrived one afternoon, when Thomas noticed fresh tracks, smaller prints that looked canine circling the property. Likely wolves had passed by, possibly drawn by the scent of the bear or the food. Worried that the bear, in its weakened condition, might fall prey to a pack, Thomas tried to shoo it off deeper into the forest, hoping it would find a safer shelter, but the bear wouldn't go. Despite his yelling and attempts to chase it off, the bear merely ambled a few steps away and gazed back at him with an almost mournful expression. Exasperated, Thomas muttered, "Don't you understand? It's not safe here." The bear offered no reaction beyond a weary blink. In the moment, a surge of desperation overtook Thomas. Perhaps the only way to help was to attempt to treat it more directly. He rummaged through the cabin and found a tranquilizer kit, a leftover relic from his grandfather, who once helped wildlife researchers in the area. The kit contained a low-dose tranquilizer dart, typically used for tagging smaller animals. Though risky, it was the only option that might allow Thomas to administer basic aid without the bear resisting. He took a steadying breath, read the instructions carefully, and loaded the dart into an old air rifle. Approaching the bear cautiously, he aimed from a short distance and pulled the trigger. The dart hit its mark in the bear's hindquarters, eliciting a grunt of surprise. Moments later, the bear stumbled, eventually collapsing into a drowsy half-consciousness. Thomas rushed to its side, adrenaline roaring in his ears. Up close, the bear's condition was even worse than he'd realized. The wound on its flank was deep, possibly from a trap or a desperate fight with another animal. Gently, with gloved hands, he cleaned the wound with antiseptic, applied antibiotic ointment, and bandaged it with strips of gauze. All the while, he spoke softly, reassuring the bear and himself. When it was over, he retreated a safe distance and waited anxiously for the tranquilizer to wear off. Within the hour, the bear stirred, groggy but alive. It staggered upright, gave Thomas a long, unreadable look, and then wandered back to its usual spot near the tree line. That night, Thomas replayed the footage again and again. The cameras had captured every tense moment of his ad hoc medical intervention. From the dart's impact to the gentle, trembling care he administered, it was a sight no one would believe unless they saw it. As he studied the video, a profound gratitude welled up in him. He realized that in helping this bear, he was also helping heal the ache in his own heart, the one that had been there since losing his father. Thomas found himself thinking about the nature of second chances, about how life could spiral into desperation, and how just a bit of kindness, extended at the right moment, could alter one's fate. Yet he knew how precarious the situation remained. Every day, the injury could worsen. Every day, the bear's presence invited more risk. Thomas resolved to drive into town the next morning, weather permitting, to personally speak with the rangers. They had to see the footage to understand the urgency. That night, as the snow fell, Thomas watched the feed, seeing the bear shift uncomfortably, occasionally licking its bandaged flank. The forest beyond was a dreamscape of white and shadow. If not for the camera, no one would ever believe the silent drama unfolding in this remote part of the world. At dawn, Thomas loaded his truck with supplies, double-checking he had the memory cards with the critical footage. He left extra water and a small ration of food in a covered container at the edge of the yard, hoping the bear would remain relatively safe until he returned. Then he set off down the winding road. The trip to the nearest ranger station took over an hour through twisting forest routes made perilous by snow and ice. Upon arrival, he was greeted by Ranger Lisa Moretti, who recognized him from his phone calls. She looked overworked, with dark circles under her eyes, but she listened intently as Thomas explained the situation, showing her the videos. Her expression softened from impatience to alarm as the footage played. "I had no idea it was this bad," she said, mouth taut with concern. "We've been dealing with multiple cases of displaced wildlife. It seems like last year's fires really upset the local ecosystem. Food's scarce in certain areas." Thomas nodded, feeling a pang of empathy for the rangers stretched thin. "Is there anything we can do? It's only a matter of time before this bear either succumbs to starvation or gets attacked." Lisa tapped a pen on her desk. "We might be able to relocate it to a rehabilitation facility. They have the resources to treat injuries and release animals back into the wild once they recover." Relief flooded Thomas, but it was tinged with worry. "Will it be safe?" he asked. "We'll do our best," Lisa promised, "but we'll need to sedate it properly. If it's as weak as you say, we should move quickly. Expect a team tomorrow morning, weather permitting." With a surge of hope, Thomas drove back to the cabin, heart pounding. For the first time, it felt like there was a real plan, a chance for the bear to survive. That night, another storm blew through, piling the snow high against the cabin walls. Thomas hardly slept, anxious about whether the ranger team could even make it through such weather. At dawn, he heard the faint hum of engines approaching. A snowplow led the way, followed by a ranger pickup carrying Lisa and 2 other wildlife officers. They wasted no time. After assessing the terrain, the rangers prepared a larger tranquilizer dart, specifically calibrated for an adult black bear. Thomas guided them to the spot where the bear usually lingered. Sure enough, there it was huddled in a patch of trees, eyes half-lidded in exhaustion. The rangers took aim from a safe distance, firing a dart that found its mark with a soft thud. The bear stirred, let out a low, pitiful growl, then slowly sank into sedation. Carefully, they approached, wrapping it in a tarp and checking its condition. Lisa gave Thomas a sympathetic nod as she examined the makeshift bandage. "You did a decent job," she murmured, gently lifting a corner of gauze. "Might have saved its life." Tears threatened to spill from Thomas's eyes as he watched them load the bear onto a gurney. Even in sedation, it looked vulnerable, a living reminder of how close life can come to oblivion. Thomas stroked its matted fur one last time before they hoisted it into the truck. He felt an almost painful pang in his chest as the truck rumbled away, taking his unexpected companion to a facility miles away. An overwhelming silence fell over the property, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. For a long time, Thomas just stood there, arms wrapped around himself for warmth, realizing how profoundly this brief connection had changed him. In the days and weeks that followed, Thomas received sporadic updates from Ranger Lisa. The bear had been transferred to a wildlife rehabilitation center, where it underwent surgery to properly treat its infected wound. Thanks to intravenous fluids and steady, nutritious meals, it slowly regained strength. Thomas visited once, accompanied by Lisa, though he wasn't allowed direct contact. From behind a viewing window, he saw the bear in a large enclosure, still lean but noticeably healthier. Watching it stand on all fours, sniff at the air with renewed vigor, stirred something powerful in his heart. The entire ordeal had been captured on camera, from the bear's midnight knock to the quiet, tender scenes of Thomas administering care. At Lisa's urging, parts of the footage were shared with conservation groups to highlight the challenges wildlife faced in a region recovering from natural disruptions. The reaction was immense. Donations poured into the rehab center. People who saw the footage described being deeply moved by the bear's plight and by the unexpected compassion of a solitary man in the woods. Local news outlets even reached out to Thomas for interviews. He found himself thrust into an uncomfortable spotlight. Yet, amidst the sudden attention, He held on to the idea that the real story was about the bear's resilience and the capacity of humans to reach beyond fear and into empathy. 6 months passed. Spring melted the last snowdrifts, and the forest blossomed with renewed life. Thomas remained at the cabin, tending a small vegetable garden and writing in his journal. His father's old rocking chair had become his favorite spot to watch the changing seasons. He had heard rumors that the bear, now fully recovered, might be released back into the wild. When Lisa confirmed the date, Thomas felt his heart race. A group of wildlife experts planned to release the bear not far from where it was found, hoping it would adapt to a more stable habitat this time. On the day of the release, Thomas joined them in a clearing a few miles from his cabin. The transport crate was lowered gently and the door was unlatched. For a few tense moments, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the bear emerged, blinking at the sunlight as though seeing it for the first time. Its coat gleamed and its muscles rippled with restored vitality. Thomas stood at a respectful distance, camera by his side. The bear ambled a few steps, paused, and glanced around. Their eyes met briefly. In that fleeting moment, Thomas imagined he saw recognition. Then, with a soft huff, the bear turned and padded away into the dense undergrowth. Afterward, the group cheered quietly. Lisa gave Thomas a pat on the back, but he felt overwhelmed with emotion. A sense of closure, yes, but also an expansion of the soul. He had been part of something extraordinary, something that bridged the gap between species, fear, and fate. In time, the videos and images Thomas had recorded became a viral phenomenon. Many saw only the sensational aspect, a starving bear knocking on a cabin door. But those who looked deeper discovered a story of compassion, resilience, and a man's personal growth. Reporters asked if he regretted his risky decision to feed the bear. Thomas always gave the same thoughtful answer: "I don't recommend anyone do what I did, but in that moment, I couldn't let it die on my porch." He learned that sometimes you have to break a few rules to uphold a greater moral truth. The cameras had captured every awkward, frightening, tender moment, making it undeniable, unimpeachable proof of what had really happened in that remote Montana cabin. To this day, Thomas still lives in the cabin. He's no longer running from the world, but embracing it on his own terms. Every time he steps onto his porch, he wonders if the bear might ever wander by again. Sometimes, on a quiet evening, when the wind rustles the pines just right, he imagines. He hears a soft knock on the door, and though he knows it's probably just the wind, he smiles, remembering a night when boundaries dissolved and a starving bear found a lifeline in the unlikeliest of places. Thank you for joining me on this remarkable journey into the heart of Glacier National Park, where a chance encounter between a struggling man and a starving bear transcended fear and forged an unbreakable bond. This story is a testament to the power of compassion, the kind that helps us overcome our limitations and reminds us of our shared vulnerability on this planet. By watching, you have become part of that circle of empathy, bearing witness to a series of events that challenged expectations and warmed hearts around the world. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps spread the message that kindness can exist in even the harshest corners of our world. Let's continue to uplift each other and the creatures that rely on us by keeping hope and empathy alive. Until next time, stay inspired and be kind.